Diane. All right. I can tell you what, I've been dreaming about the opportunity to welcome Jim Warford to our state. Not yet, Jim. I want to tell a story about you. I was introduced to Jim a few years ago, and I called my mama. And folks here from Ithaca know I talk about my mama all the time. She's a mama because I'm from Virginia. And I called her, and I said, I've met the type of educator I want to be when I get a little older. And for the folks who know, have heard about my mom, she was in the classroom for 44 years, and she retired. And I mean, she really retired. She's right now drinking tea with her feet up, and she's not doing nothing. She's enjoying retirement. And I learned, Jim, you and her are the same age. And she says to me all the time, and she sees her grandkids, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm handing this over to the folks who have the fire to change their practices and to meet the needs of young people that I don't know how to talk to. She said that to me as the most respected educator in our community. So she said, what kind of educator are you going to be? And I said, I met the guy I want to be like when I'm your age. He's on fire. He's short and he's bald, just like me too. I said, Mama, he's white. That's the only difference between us. But he's on fire. He's done it all. He's been the chancellor, the first chancellor of education in Florida Public Schools, has been superintendent, has been the executive director for Florida State School Administrators, and now he's all over the country inspiring folks around how to meet the needs of our contemporary learners. So I'm excited about having him with us today, and he's going to take us into lunch, but he's going to inspire you when he does so. Jim, welcome. Come on up.
Hello? Hello. I'm Jim Warford, and wow, after that introduction, I think I should just sit down. We're gonna switch out my computer so that I can use the technology, and I'm gonna move around because I may be more HD than you are. HD, I cannot sit still. I knew that early on before we had all those alphabet, and designations. I just knew. And my teachers knew I was a pain, and most days working on their last nerve. I was bored frequently in school, but I want to tell you, 30 years ago, I was thinking about this morning. 30 years ago, next week, I was a new teacher at Vanguard High School in Ocala, Florida. And I'd been there a couple of years. I was hired to teach drama. I had an English degree, but my original degree was in theater communication. I don't know that Louisville knows this about me, but I was changing careers. I was a professional musician at the time, performer. I'd been a songwriter in Nashville. I may be the only superintendent Louisville knows that is a published songwriter. I put myself through school playing music. I was born on the edges of Appalachia, in real poverty. I was born in a house that didn't have running water or electricity. In a part of Kentucky where, Cornell, this community, you can appreciate this, the gene pool there was a tad shallow. Those jokes have a basis in reality. But very musical, so I don't remember a time when I didn't play anything with strings on it. And I continued to do that until I was about 30 years old. My second child was born in a hotel. My wife said, well, it's time to make that change you've always dreamed of, because I had always wanted to teach. So I walked into my principal's office. I had been teaching drama in a school that didn't have a stage, didn't have a theater, didn't have really a strong interest in one. And for the last 2 years, I had been writing all these grants. Because at that time, there was all this Carl Perkins money on the CTE side for the big technology of the day, analog video. This was pre-computer. This was before computers and video got made. News, Film at 11. Some of you remember the TV shows. And I had been very good at those grants, and I had piles of equipment, big opportunity, I went to my principal and I said, Ken Vianello, I love him to this day and I stay in touch. I said, I've got an idea. I said, I've been using all this stuff in my class and I can't keep my kids away from it. They will do anything, they get their hands on it. They want to do stuff, they want to make stuff. I said, I've got all these ideas. And I said, I think we could create a television production class. And I said, I guarantee you, we can do amazing things. And Ken looked at me and he said, well, where does that class live in the official course core directory identified by the state to approve courses that I've done? And I got real quiet and I looked at him because I'd done my homework and I said, well, it doesn't. There is no such course. And I loved Ken because he looked at me and he said, Jim, you really think this will be good for kids? And you can teach things that will be useful? I said, yes. And he said, then what could we call this course? So for the first several years, we called it Research and Media. And it was in the library section of the course code directory. Eventually, I helped write the standards in the state of Florida. We created a course, and now it's common all across the country, but this was 30 years ago. And he said, well, what do you know about technology? And I said, not much. I said, but I have this other idea, you see. Kids, it's in their genes. I said, I know what to do with it. I know about reading. I know about writing. I know about even some communication and journalism skills. And I said, so I'll teach them that. I'll let them teach me the technology. So already I'd broken all kinds of rules, but I was a young teacher, didn't know any different. And what I want to leave with you is, when I work with young teachers, one of the first things I tell them, and I do a lot of mentoring and leadership coaching with principals, don't be afraid to break the rules, because that's how the new rules get created. And best practice wasn't always so. Somebody had to be doing next practice out there somewhere for best practice to be evolved. So I'm going to try to do some things differently this day because it's just the way I am. I'm going to talk to you straight because all I've done is pay attention to people my entire career. My leadership philosophy is that if I've got challenges and problems to solve and things to do and create, and I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to find a better room. So I came to Ithaca today, and Derek and Diane, and I told him this morning, I said, well, I'm sure glad you're here because, you know, I already know everything I'm coming to speak about. So if I don't learn something from you, which I did, thank you, I will dig deeper. I'm not going to leave here having acquired anything new, but I am. And I'm also just excited because I know the superintendent, and I know the exciting opportunities that are going on in this school, in this district, because of his leadership. And I'm going to have to multitask here for a minute as I get into this. And I didn't, it won't take me but just a second, because I do have some stuff that I want to share with you. And I'm going to break a bunch of rules in doing it. So the first thing is always acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla in the room because he's going to stay there anyway. How many of you are disappointed, like me, that Ken Robinson's not here today? Let's go ahead. Let's get it. I'm disappointed. I followed Derek's work some, but I never had a chance to meet him. So that was great. And I said, Ken Robinson, you know, I'm a fan. I'm like a groupie, but our paths have not crossed. This has been on my calendar with a circle, you know, for months. So yes, I'm disappointed, but he sent a great video. I wanted to applaud after his video. I don't know about you. I thought that was great. Yeah, let's go ahead and applaud now. See, I've believed forever in the power of technology. So before I knew he was going to send the video, I said, well, heck, I texted Lou Bell. I love Lou Bell because I can text him all the time, 24/7. He's right there. He's as wired as I am. I think that device must be tethered to his arm. But I said, well, what if I just like to show a video. If he's not going to be here, I'd like to talk about it. And I said, his ideas need to be here. His voice needs to be in the room. I organized everything I was thinking about based upon creativity, transforming education with technology. That's what we're talking about. And so he said, fine. So I'm going to, in this little talk, I'm going to show you two videos that are longer, another one, but one is a teacher I've been working with for about 5 years, but I thought I would also bring Ken's voice into the room to frame everything. But I wanted to tell you that I've been thinking about the idea of transforming education for a long time. And the reason I'm so excited, as Lou Bell keeps referring to, is because I believe in the future that's finally here. Teachers are doing things today all across this country. Teachers are reinventing the classroom, and I'm going to show you something. And I'm going to focus on the aspect of technology because I've been into it for a long time. I fell in love with technology as a small boy when the bathroom came indoors. You're laughing. It was a transformational event in my life. Indoor plumbing. That's when I said, technology, yes. So I've been an early adopter ever since that moment. And I still am. Just like you, I get tired sometimes of keeping up. This is something I do every talk. I don't care whether I'm talking to a group of superintendents or classroom teachers in a workshop on technology integration. I use this slide. It's like a ritual. It's a mantra. Please turn your devices on. I love Ithaca because I don't have to do that here. You already had them on. This is a very, very wired and connected district. I kind of gauge the places I go by the presence online, the fact that you had a hashtag, that people were already using it. I've already used it. Otherwise, I'd be turning you on to today's meet, and we'd create a little meeting room, and you could talk to me for the next 6 months if you want to, or follow up, or we could have dialogue. But I'm going to keep going here, so that hopefully I won't be a frustrating point between you and lunch, which is always a highlight of our day. So, Sir Ken Robinson. It's really interesting. I think somebody is paying attention because he has the most viewed TED Talks of all time. Now, I don't know about you, but this is Ithaca. I work all over. I'm gonna ask this question. How many of you are fond of TED Talks and look at them regularly? Raise your hands. I don't always get that response. But I thought you might be, and you may have been aware of their power. But they're one of the places I go to, to get inspired, to get new ideas, not just in education but across. So what I'd like to do is show one of Ted's most viewed talks of all time, Ken Robinson, on how schools kill creativity. I'm going to bet that a bunch of people in this room have seen it. But I'm going to also bet that you haven't seen it more than I have seen it. I always find that it is worth watching. I always find when I watch it, I get a new reflection or a new meta-cognition, meta-thinking. I like the way you framed meta-thinking rather than cognition, because cognition sounds so neuroscience-y, but meta-thinking is nice. So I think to frame what I'm going to talk about, because, a lot of people talk about this, but when I really start probing it, especially with superintendents, somebody was telling me this too, Marlon, somebody was just telling me, had the same experience. How many of you have actually watched this? Well, it's on my list. So if you haven't seen it, now you will. If you have seen it, it'll be a good review. It's going to frame what I'm going to try to illustrate in a practical sense. What does what he's talking about look like in a classroom? And how are some of these ideas being carried out? And I think you're going to see the connection between what Ken says and this teacher in Montana that's also going to join us, thanks to technology, and we're going to try to have a little time to talk about some of these ideas. I would also want to offer this. When I show this video, I want you to be thinking. I want you to be engaged. I tweeted and I wrote down in my notes, we are never more engaged than when we are thinking. Something Derek said, we are never more engaged than when we are thinking. Because I've been focused on engagement for a long, long time, and I have never, ever put it in that, but that's what I've observed myself. That absolutely lines up with my observations, but I've never phrased it that way. And so I want you to be thinking, because when this video is over, I'm going to give you an opportunity. We have mics here. I want you to think about if there's something in this that really troubles you. Because let's make no mistake about it. Ken's not just talking about tinkering around the edges. He's not just talking about kind of how we could get the next little bump in our state test scores. Ken is talking about a transformation of how we do school. A transformation. And those are the people that excite me. You said something else, Derek, that I say a lot. I tell teachers all the time, especially in communities like this. I say, you're confusing every day compliance with engagement. Because your kids play school really, really well. But see, I've been interviewing kids for 20 years. Some of you learned that's how boring school is, not from your students. But just check me on this. You learned it from talking to your kids. I mean, your kids. My 3 kids are the ones that taught me the most about it, but I've been always talking to kids. So let's watch Sir Ken, and then when he's done, if you've got something you want to say about this, good or positive or negative, I'm going to give you a chance. So you be thinking about that. Oh, well, we're going to back it up between there. I never plugged in the mic. Right here. Thank you.
Reforming public education. There are 2 reasons for it.
Okay, let's see if we can start it.
The first one is economic.
I want to do it.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are 2 reasons for it. The first one is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out, how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity, and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which is if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. So people say you have to raise standards if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally. What we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education. There are already two types of people, academic and non-academic. Smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescription for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we have our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalising them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff. At school, for the most part. It seems to me not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardised testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say that they are particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you're fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children to education by anaesthetising them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep, we should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modelled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organised on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialised into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are. You know, it's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. What do you mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardised testing and standardised curricula, and it's about standardisation. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity to creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, I mean, the test for this, I mean, one kind of common example would be, people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? You know, like, does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? You know. Now, they tested this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 15? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that I'm convinced is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration. No, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Second, we have to recognise that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomise people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
Now, one of the reasons that I'm so excited today, more than I've been for years and years, is because so many of the issues that he raises, I see a potential improvement in the Common Core movement across the country. Although many politicians around our country are doing their very, very best to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory on this issue. Is there anybody that would like to get their voice in the room right now? Because you got a mic up here. If there's something about this that you'd like to respond to, something that you'd like to question, or that you'd like to comment on, please do. Come down. But come down fast. Come on down.
Hi, My name is Kristen Herman. I was a long-term sub in ICSD last year. I'm currently unemployed. Hopefully not for long.
That's right.
I am also learning to knit and to play ukulele.
Good.
And when I do those things, I think about, okay, these are things I want to be able to do in my life. I'm passionate about music. I sing really well in the shower. So I want to be able to share that passion. When I think about the two things that I need in order to learn those things, I need time to explore, time to collaborate, and there has to be an emphasis on that collaboration. And there has to be an emphasis on making mistakes and allowing that to play itself out in however it's going to do so. So I feel like when we watch these things, when we watch videos like Sir Ken, and listen to you, and listen to all these great speakers who have so many great ways of thinking about this, you're preaching to the choir. We all know it. Yes, I'm there. Yes, let's change it. But how do we change the structure of the individual classroom? And I think what we need is more time. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think we need to focus the conversation on what a classroom looks like in order for these things to happen.
I agree completely. So I want to try to do that for you in the rest of my session.
Okay,
so thank you for setting that up. But I think you actually need three things. Anytime we want to try to give people new skills or talents, they need training, tools, and time. I call them the 3 T's. And when I start to work with teachers around technology integration, when I start to work with schools and districts, over and over and over, I see people making the same mistakes. And the same mistake is they buy all this technology and they put it in a school, and they don't invest in the training, the tools, and the times that the teachers need to acquire, the effectiveness in using those tools. What's exciting to me is that I see the opposite happening. Some of the most creative classrooms I'm in, and I'm going to try to talk a little bit about that. What does it look like with technology? It's all ground up. It's teachers taking what they've got and figuring out how they can do new and different things with it within certain models. So we do have to absolutely find the training tools and time. I think there's still value in getting our thinking lined up like Sir Ken does, or Sir Ken did here. Let me get back on here because my computer's going to shut off because I didn't find the password. I've got it with me. So I want to get back into this. Anybody else want to comment? The result of all of this technology outside and inside of our schools that Ken is talking about, that's, I think, causing the problem today to be even greater than it's ever been. Today's kids are flat out wired differently. And I've been saying that for 30 years. I've been telling people kids are wired differently. The good news is, it's no longer my opinion. The neuroscience is getting pretty settled on this. Here's an excellent, I'm going to give you a little homework. If you haven't read this book, it's by Dr. Gary Small, Stanford neuroscientist, and a team of brilliant neuroscientists. And they document, and look at the title of this, the subtitle, Surviving the Technological Alteration of the Modern Mind. They argue in this book that not only are kids wired differently today, but the change is taking place in these children faster than at any point in time in our human history. The rate at which this change is occurring is unprecedented in these children. So when I talk to teachers, when I start working with them, I'll say, "Are you frustrated?" They go, "Yes, we're frustrated, and I'm more frustrated than I've ever been." And then we go through a little frustration kind of venting and owning the frustration session. And then I surprise them and say, "Good, glad to hear that. Got that off your chest now? Because let me tell you something. You're working in public schools today and you're not frustrated? Hell, you're not paying attention. You ought to be frustrated. We're asking you to work on a problem. We didn't give you the time, training, your tools. The kids are different. We didn't explain that to you. Now we're changing the standards again. We're asking you to do a Common Core. It's the biggest change in teaching and learning I've seen in my entire career. Oh, we're not going to have a lot of time for that. You should be frustrated. It's the people who've given up frustrated that I'm the most concerned about. But I'm also seeing teachers do really some exciting things with that frustration. Why? Because they recognize this. I want to show you some other research. This is a study down there at the bottom. You can check it out. See, our technology, we know kids are wired differently because today we can take pictures of brains as we do all kinds of things. We've got sensors so small and so portable, we can wire people up and let them walk around and do stuff. And see what's going on inside their head. What the patterns of the cognition actually look like. So here's 7 days, a week in the life of a student. And this has been replicated over and over and over again, but here's their brain activity. Here's their brain activity in a lab. And they get a little thinking going. I suspect we get some thinking going here. Then we get homework, sleep. We got the highest pattern so far. I gotta keep being careful about touching. Class. Class. It's relax. Class. Class. You can find the class without me pointing them out. The traditional model by which our teachers were taught, the traditional model on which they were trained, it didn't work on me 50 years ago. That's why I was working on their last nerve. That's why this work is so important. It certainly does not work with today's digital natives who are wired differently. That book, Gary Small, it's not for educators, it's not by an educator, and it's really not about education. But every teacher ought to read it. There's some good news in there about the potential for our human evolutionary development, and there's some real bad news. The human characteristic of empathy is on the measurable decline. Children's lack of social, emotional skills is becoming evident to the basic classroom teacher. Every group of teachers I debrief with tells me the same thing. They will tell me they'll sit in the classroom and watch kids sit in the same room and text each other, or in a car, or on the bus on the way to the volleyball game. So if we don't teach them to think about thinking, how are we going to begin to get at some of these really important, essential human skills? Empathy. It just happens to be one of those characteristics that keep us human. So when the society figures out this is a real problem in our children, just who do you think they're going to turn to anyway to solve it? So you might as well volunteer now. We are all teachers of digital literacy, whether we want to be or not. Some of us have just embraced it. So, how can we actually engage, educate, and empower these kids? We need a new mental model. I love E3, and I tell people all the time, find the map that works for you, because one of the most important things that we need anytime we start a journey to a new destination is a good map, because without a good map, we won't know how to get there, we could get lost on the way, and we won't know how to get back. And I think that's fundamentally the source of most of the frustration that's going on across the country. And folks, don't just think it's here, because a lot of you responded to my question about frustrating. Everywhere I go, from superintendent groups to teacher groups, everywhere I go, teachers tell me they are more frustrated than they have ever been in their career. We have an epidemic of frustration. So, I think part of the problem, and again, I want to link back to something Derek said, Dr. Cabrera, about the power of mental models. It's been a part of my work for a long, long time. Why is it that somebody in the middle of Israel can get up and strap on a vest full of explosives and walk into a bazaar full of women and children and kill hundreds of people? How does that happen? They have a very faulty mental model. Mental models are the most powerful force in human behavior, in my opinion. You know, we don't see the world as the world is. That's the stuff of saints, poets, mystics. Few people struggle and pay the price to see and touch reality maybe as it might be. Most of us, we see the world as we think it is and as our mental model tells us it is. And you've been studying the relationship between that two. So here's the mental model that I've been using for a long, long time. Don't have time to go into it today, but it's also the work that's grounded a lot of my work with teachers. You know, there's another group of folks down the road from here in Albany, New York. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Bill Daggett? We're the rigor and relevance people. I'm a senior advisor and fellow and consultant and speaker with Dr. Daggett's group, full disclosure. Dr. Daggett created this about 25 years ago, way before the Common Core or any of these. But it's been guiding my work for almost 20 years. 15 years I've been actively trying to work to get it into classrooms and use it in my technology. It's called the Rigor and Relevance Framework. And everywhere I go today, people are talking about rigor and relevance. And I love that Dr. Cabrera was focused on the rigor, how do we extend critical thinking, which is what Bloom's taxonomy did in both the original and the revised, and now Webb's depth of knowledge. But Dr. Daggett took Bloom's taxonomy, because a lot of people don't know this, Dr. Daggett was a student of Dr. Bloom's at the time. And he argued, he was a difficult student like me. He was ADHD and pain in the neck. And he was always pushing back. And he said, you've got application in your knowledge taxonomy, but it's not weighted enough to, what I'm after is what good teaching and learning looks like. So he added the application model or framework down here. From knowledge in one discipline to applying in that discipline to applying in real world predictable and a real world unpredictable situations. So a lot of my work is focused on getting teachers to change their mental model of real world application. And what's the difference between real world unpredictable and real world predictable? Well, it just so happens that shows up in the Common Core and in one of the big idea shifts around the Smarter Balanced and the PARC assessments, the idea now that in the real world, problems have more than one right answer. Doesn't fit our mental model. School is organized exactly the opposite. If it doesn't have one, if the question doesn't have just one right answer, we probably won't deal with it. This leads these four quadrants. Low level of knowledge, low level or no application, high level of application, low level of critical thinking or rigor, high level of rigor and assimilation and critical thinking and meta thinking, but no application over to the D quadrant. And when I talk with teachers, very quickly they can take this in a matter of a little bit of training. They can put this on a lesson plan and kind of plot out their point, because this is, after all, a matrix. Level 4 and level 4 on application puts me here. Adaptation, creativity, it gives us this. But 80%, 85% of all the classrooms I observe all across the country, from New York to California, from Alaska to the Virgin Islands, I see teachers doing all the work. It's another reason they're frustrated and tired. What are the students doing when the teachers are in the A quadrant? They're showing up to watch them work. That's why it's flatlined on the brain research. Because the students sit in the back of the class go, whoa, look at Mr. Warford, man, he's working hard this morning. Wow, he's working so hard, he's wearing me out. You know, I was working hard at Burger King last night to help my family and get my car. And so I think I'll take a nap because Mr. Warford, he'll be working when I wake up. But that never happens to any of you, I'm sure. It's only me. I had all kinds of techniques to wake them up, but and keep them awake. How do we actually do this? I've been training teachers in this for 15 years. What's exciting today is they've solved the biggest problem, because teachers say, I love this idea of D-quadrant. I love project-based learning. I love inquiry-based learning. I love to get the kids doing that stuff. I just don't have time. Well, the teachers I'm working with, and I'm going to show you, they figured it out. Now, there's all kinds of ways to integrate technology. This is not the only way, but it's the most creative thing that I'm seeing going on all across the country. The flipped classroom. The flipped classroom. So, the flipped classroom teachers have stopped lecturing and captured that time for more application. They've been able to move out of the A quadrant, and I know teachers who live in D. They live there in D every day, all day, because they don't lecture at all anymore. From kindergarten to college, it's going on. Nobody's telling these teachers to, nobody's showing them how. They're just trying to figure out the solutions to some of this problem. Now, I'm going to take a quick little tour of what some of these lectures look like from kindergarten to high school.
Superhero A will say his name and put up his big muscle arms and say A.
Kindergarten.
A.
Number 13, hat. The girl wore a big hat.
Distance from 0 to 1 is the same as the distance from 1 to 2. Likewise, it's the same as the distance from 2 to 3, and so on and so on.
Now, those phrases, what we can do is simply say me gusta and then attach them to the end. So, an example, I can say, picking from that list, me gusta tocar la guitarra, me gusta cantar.
Well, see, you guys had developed this massive bomb that you used on Japan after World War II. And we wanted to be big and bad as well and powerful. So we started to try to create nuclear weapons to rival yours.
What became the big bomb? And of course we have command economies, in other words for those, planned, centrally planned, command and control, or socialism.
Welcome class. Today I will be sharing with you how to make a fruit smoothie. These things are scrumptious, tasty good.
Because, as you can see, it's fizzing right here. It's producing a gas. It's bubbling over.
Tendons, as you see here, connect muscles to bones. Here you see the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle, being connected to the calcaneus.
Another thing I want to talk about is something boring. When I grew up, I had this idea that a cell was like a bag of jelly, and you had stuff like a nucleus inside it, and it would essentially float around.
Here in Woodland Park, we're at a higher altitude, so the temperature is actually blowing.
High level of implementation is allowing the students to create the video.
A story, a non-fiction story, written about someone by someone else. And I have an example here. It is my Lady Gaga biography.
And that gives us a lower mass of 44 grams.
Those potato chip bag. Now, compared to what we saw, it's totally full. Foil's a lot of action.
30 years ago, I was flipping my classroom using analog video, trying to figure out how I could take myself out of the equation more So what teachers have learned, had a great kindergarten teacher at a conference recently talking about what this looks like in a kindergarten class. Think about what kindergarten teachers do mostly. They repeat themselves over and over around basic skills. Letter sounds, colors, names. What these teachers are doing is putting this, they're capturing this in a video, letting the students watch the videos over and over as they need it at their own pace, while they spend more time with helping the students apply those concepts. More activities, more hands-on. Several things very counterintuitive. I just showed you a whole bunch of videos. But what's really important about the flipped model, what separates the highly effective classes from those that are not, is not the videos. It's what the teachers do with the class time. The big idea here is they're letting technology take some of the repetitive delivery of the content that the students must have. Because let's face it, no matter how long and much and how well and eloquently and in what a beautiful British accent Ken Robinson talks about creativity, students still have to learn to read. They have to learn to read at high levels and write at high levels and communicate orally at high levels if they want to be successful in the 21st century global economy. So they're still going to have to get that content. What these teachers are doing, they're figuring out, is they're letting the technology do the drudgery. The kindergarten teachers are turning the flip charts into technology. It's that simple. What's also counterintuitive is I find relationships, teacher relationships, student-teacher relationships stronger in these classrooms. Rather than the technology creating a barrier or making the learning experience less personal, it's actually far more personal because the students are working at their own pace, at their own rate, and they have much more one-on-one interaction time with both their fellow students in collaborative learning and with their teachers. So as I interview these students over the years, I'm seeing how this is working out. And again, it's a dream that I've had for long and so exciting. The teacher I've worked with the longest, Paul Anderson, Bozeman, Montana, small school in the middle of Montana. A year ago, he was Montana's Teacher of the Year. He was also a runner-up for National Teacher of the Year. Paul, in his flipped classrooms, he has lectured for almost 5 years now. He's totally removed the lecture. His classroom is pure quad D all day, pure hands-on applications. The students come in, work collaboratively or individually in teams to work together. Paul has created multiple YouTube channels. He, like Ithaca, pushed his district, and he had a principal that first just said, go ahead and turn him loose to create wiki, blogs, open up YouTube, use all these resources in his classroom. Last year, he got an award from YouTube. He's not Ken Robinson. Most of you never heard of him. He passed 10 million YouTube views of biology lessons. I run across teachers all over the world that are using his work in his class, in their classes. Paul is reinventing the classroom for the 21st century. And he's following the principles that I believe are important. Last year, Paul took it to a whole new level. Paul had been thinking about this for a long time because he's big into gaming theory, and he had incorporated a lot of gaming theory into his classrooms. But last year, he took an environmental science class and created a video game. He turned it into a video game-like experience in the classroom. Would you like to see a little bit of that? Paul is also worth your time, and I thought about this, but he raises lots of profound themes that follow what Ken Robinson was talking about.
My name is Mr. Anderson, and my classroom is a video game. I can't think of a better way to start a story than Alice falling down the rabbit hole, and she comes upon a bottle, and the bottle says simply, drink it. And so I'm a teacher, so I wanted to try to recreate that. And so what I did is I left my computer in my class, and I had Angry Birds on it, and then I had a card next to it, and it simply said the word play. And then I walked away. But I wanted to see what would happen. And so I left the webcam on, and so I've got a little video of the kids as they come into class. And so would you like to see that?
Yes.
Yeah, as if you have an option. I love how they took turns. And I love Jackson's eyes, if you watch him. Yes! Success! And so that look in his eyes, that look of learning and trying something new and failing and trying it again, is something that we aspire to see in the eyes of our kids. And we don't do that. A lot of the time it's glazed over look. And so I wanted to try to apply some of these dynamics into my classroom. So I grew up in the 1980s playing video games, and these video games taught me lessons that I think we could apply in schools today. The first thing I learned is that video games are fun, and school should be fun as well. Unfortunately, most kids wouldn't say their typical day is fun. However, there are elements of school that all students love. They love seeing their friends, and they love learning. Unfortunately, they spend most of the day just passively sitting in front, listening to a teacher lecture. So I think school should be fun. Second thing I learned is that failure is okay. If it takes you 80 times to clear the third elevator stage in Donkey Kong, that's okay. Failure is simply part of the learning process. However, in schools, we tend to stigmatize failure. You don't get to take a quiz over and over and over again until you finally pass it. In fact, failure of individuals, and right now, failure of schools, is highly stigmatized. And so I think we need to send a message that failure is okay. The third thing I learned is the importance of leveling. This could be applied in schools in two ways. When a teacher decides to move at a specific pace, that's okay for some of the students in their class, but some of the students are automatically going to be bored, and some of the students are quickly going to be confused. And so I think that students should be able to move on their own pace through a mastery system where they master a level and then they can move on to the next one. They also should be able to level up, becoming more powerful as they learn new material in the class. I also think that we give the wrong lecture at the beginning of the year. And I used to give this lecture at the beginning of the year. I would say, you all have an A. From this point forward, you will fall precipitously until you eventually land at your final grade. No game would ever be designed this way. And so, one of the great things about being a teacher is that you get summer break. And summer break is great because you get a break from school, but you also can reinvent your class, make it something that has never been before. And so, if you try to do that during the year, if you try to make radical changes, the kids will just simply be confused. But if you change it during the summer, you can make huge, sweeping changes in your class, and the kids will never know what hit them. And so this was my dream. I wanted to reinvent my class as a video game. But I didn't want the kids to just sit in front and watch a video game like Oregon Trail or Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. I wanted to take the most compelling elements of gaming and then apply it in the classroom. This took a lot of work. And so I had to create a class. It's called Biohazard 5. It's got a narrator, it's got a narrative. All the kids come together there. I've created about 100 video podcasts that take them through the lecture. And so when they get that point, they can kind of learn. I have all these special activities. So in class, the kids can apply the material that we're learning in the real world. I have a bunch of inquiry labs. This one right here is a photosynthesis lab. You can see my students very riveted. They're studying photosynthesis right on using little chads that we cut out of a leaf. I've developed hundreds of questions, and I have a mastery system where the students can take quizzes over and over and over again until they finally get it. I have a leveling system, so they start with 0 experience points at the beginning of the year. I borrowed this from Lee Sheldon at the University of Indiana. So basically they come in on day 1. I invented the bottom level as primordial soup because I teach biology. And so they gain experience points and they can move their way up to like Dumbo Octopus and Mountain Gorilla and maybe Grand Master at the end. I also have a leaderboard, so they play with an avatar and they can see how they're doing in the class, how they're doing against everybody else. This is the most popular resource in the class. Kids are constantly logging in to see how they stack up. I also got to pilot a classroom set of iPads, and so kids had an internet-connected device at all times. And so finally, the summer was over, and I stood in front of the class, like this apparently, and I said, "Hello, my name is Mr. Anderson, and my class is a video game. So what I want you to do is grab an iPad. I want you to log into Biohazard 5. I want you to watch a video. I want you to do some reading. I want you to take a quiz, and then I want you to head off into the class." Now, if I would have done this with my students' parents, it would have been the most frustrating day of my life. But the kids grew up with this technology, and the technology today simply works. And so they were headed off on their own. And so my class is a learning classroom. If you were to come in, you would find kids reading, watching videos, applying, doing special activities, trying to solve challenges, working together or working alone. And so it's a really neat, I had a teacher come and we were just talking about halfway through the class and he said, "What you've created is like a shop class." Because he was a shop teacher at once and he said, "So as a shop teacher, you teach them some skills and then the kids can apply that." And so it's like that. I would love to keep telling you about how great it is, how the test scores seem to be going up, and how the kids are learning how to learn independently. But I am a science teacher, and that's not what gets us excited. In science, what gets us excited is discovering something new. And so I want to talk about 3 ways that I failed. Number 1, a conventional classroom is like a school bus, where all the students log in, they just get on, and the teacher is like the bus driver, and it drives from point A to point B, and you can make sure that all the students get there. And so what I had done is I had given each of them a brand new car, keys, and I said, "Drive." And so some of them stalled out, and some of them raced ahead, and some of them drove right into a wall. And so I need to give them more scaffolding next year. The next thing I learned is the importance of reading. Kids struggled with reading when you make your class independent. And I should have seen this coming because it's the biggest indicator of success. And I think the reason I didn't see it coming is that I had never stopped talking. Because that's what good teachers do. We read the book, and then we come up with really good examples, and then we present it in a dynamic way, and the kids can just sit there, and then they can learn. Why would they want to read the book? We read it for them. And so when I forced them to read the book, a lot of them struggled, and we've had to work with that. The last thing I learned is that we are not Vulcans. In the most recent Star Trek movie, young Spock sits in a little module, and he's surrounded by computer screens, and the computer keeps throwing questions at him in philosophy and relativity, and that's his school day. He just sits in a little module like that. And so a lot of people think that they can change education by somehow using videos or automating the learning process. That sucks. Who would want to be in a school like that? Kids are coming to school to be social. And so I had to add elements of social learning in my class to make it more compelling. And so this is a TED Talk. And so all good TED Talks always end with a call to action. And so what can you do? And so I think schools need to move from a passive teacher-centered learning environment to an active student-centered learning environment. And that's what I did. I was off to the side now as a mentor in the class. So how do we do that? Well, if you're a student, you give feedback to your teachers. Everything I do in my class is a result of feedback I've gotten from my students. And what do you do if you're a parent? You write an email if you want your schools to change. The only emails I get from parents are complaining about their...
Okay. we're out of time anyway. I'm going to share what Paul says right at the very end of his video. And it's the most important. Remember he started out talking about Alice in the Bottle? Alice in Wonderland? What's in that bottle? What's in that bottle is your passion. So to that young lady that came up and talked about teaching, the first and most important lesson is to find your passion. And bring that passion to school with you every day, regardless of what you're teaching. Then you have to be willing to try, fail, learn, and repeat. Do, fail, learn, and repeat. And be willing to embrace your mistakes in all of that process. Everything that you need to find, I will tell you, the resources are out there. Not every teacher is going to be Paul Anderson, nor should they. There's all kinds of different ways to leverage technology to find more time in your classroom. The most valuable time that you have is your time with your students. So how can you begin to shift that basic content acquisition, quadrant A instruction, into a technology environment so that you get more time for the relationships and the collaboration and the meta thinking that's required to take all students to high levels of critical thought. Now tomorrow I'm going to do a forum. We're going to go deeper into the technology integration. I have a lot of examples I couldn't show you today because I wanted to get, I've never done this before. I've never shown both of all these videos, or these two videos. But I felt like the ideas here were worthy of the level of reflection this group, I know, brings to everything that you do and the learning objective that was set out by the day. So, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jim. And I appreciate the conversation that's happening online right now using the hashtag. It's a great conversation, and we'll continue. So it's almost time for lunch. This afternoon is Sheila Webster. It's going to be outstanding show dabbling. Cal Walker, community treasure. So we have quite a treat and a special surprise too is coming this afternoon before we leave today. Lunch will be served in the Ithaca High School cafeteria, and you may follow the signs to that space. If you wish to see the story that has been filmed by a documentarian, it will be shooting at 12:45, I believe, in this room. The book signing will happen around 1 o'clock. So enjoy the next hour and a half. It's beautiful outside. Enjoy it. We'll see you later on this afternoon. I